Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Natasha Meikle and Lawrence Conley for another ACSOM Bulletin. Welcome back to the show, guys. How you doing?
All
pregnant
good.
pause, all good. That's what we like to hear. Natasha, I'll come over to you first. It's been a long time coming, but today is the day it's finally arrived. JP's been counting it down for 120 days. It's the first competitive game. How are you feeling? How prepared or ill-prepared are we here?
Do you know what? If we're taking it in two parts, I am delighted to be getting back to Celtic Park tonight. I am so excited about that. I loved seeing everyone, or a lot of people, getting back for the Preston game. I love seeing people back in the stadium. I love seeing the excitement of fans getting back to a football game. So from this aspect that I'm getting a ticket to go tonight, I'm so excited to be there, so excited to be home again. Celtic Park in the sunshine, you really can't do better than that. But now we've got to talk about what we're going to see on the pitch and the prospect of success. And that gives me a little bit more cause for concern and maybe slightly dampens my enthusiasm for returning to the ground. I mean, I have to say I'm a bit concerned. I think we're all a bit concerned in terms of what we're going to see on the pitch. I don't think we have the strength, the depth, the quality in the squad that we need to overcome such a tough test. And the game against Preston at the weekend did nothing to alleviate those concerns in any way. I think we are going into this game underprepared, and it's frustrating to say that because we say it every time the Champions League qualifiers roll around. So to answer your original question, yes, I think we are underprepared for this game. And the sense that I get from Postecoglou is that he knows we're underprepared. He's mentioned, not being able to get signings in. He's mentioned the fitness levels. Yeah. So he also shares the fans' frustrations that we are going into this game underprepared. And it's just that real sense of annoyance that we have had a good amount of time. We've known this is coming. We knew the size of the task. We knew the size of the rebuild. And here we are in July. Today we're playing the first qualifier, and we're underprepared.
I know. I was going to ask you later on in the show, do you know anybody who's going to the game? But you've already answered that, Natasha. So before I go on to Lawrence, let's focus a wee bit on that. Your first game, no, I tell a lie. You were at a game last season reporting for a Celtic State of Mind. You were at Easter Road reporting for a Celtic State of Mind. Right. But as a fan, simply as a fan, to go and enjoy the game, this is your first game, I'm guessing, since March against St Mirren.
That's right.
Now, one of the players who scored a hat-trick that day or that night, we will be talking about him later on, Lee Griffiths. But we're looking at the situation with the fans. We've got 9,000 in tonight. Ange Postecoglou touched on their importance this evening, as did Callum McGregor yesterday when they were speaking to the press. Yet, we're hearing other figures coming out in terms of confirmed figures for other games in Glasgow. I'm going to go to Lawrence on this one, Natasha. What's your thoughts on the disparity, Lawrence Conley, when you look at Ibrox and some of the figures we're getting from there?
Well, we've heard there's 17,000. I mean, there's already a perception after last season that we've got a Scottish government that's treating Celtic differently. On the face of it, it would appear they're doing the same. There's 4 days difference. Celtic Park's the bigger arena, bigger and better arena, and we've got 9,000, but on the south side they can have 17 if the figures are to be believed.
Yeah.
On the face of it, it seems manifestly unfair.
Well, it just doesn't add up. I mean, one person who has been speaking up about it, and it wasn't because of today's announcement, he was referring to the gates at Hampden, for example. Natasha's Chris Sutton. Chris shoots from the hip. I think so does Ange Postecoglou. We might talk about that later on in the show. And I'm liking that. I actually do like his approach because it's controlled. It's a totally controlled approach, unlike the previous manager who seemed unhinged when he was being spoken to by the press. But Chris Sutton has raised the point. Where are they getting the figures from? Is there something I'm missing here, Natasha? There doesn't seem to be any formula to this.
Do you know what it is? It's just the lack of transparency. If there is a reason, then great, come out and tell us and help us understand that. Otherwise, you just create this discussion and debate about why these figures are so different. All they need to do is be transparent, come out and tell us whatever formula they're using, whatever method of calculating how many fans can get into a ground. come out and tell us that and help us understand to save this debate and to save the questioning over why there are discrepancies. All I can hope is that, if these are the figures being talked about across the city, that they are then replicated for our games going forward. But there really just seems to be so much of, the process that doesn't add up and doesn't make sense. So it is frustrating. You even look at what Celtic have been allowed, our 9,000 season ticket, or 9,000 people were allowed back into the stadium. Mm-hmm. The distancing that they're having to put in place, again, you struggle to add that up. There's people who live together, are in the same household, in the same network, aren't allowed to sit together. They're getting placed 5 rows apart. Some are getting placed sections apart when they're going to have shared a car or shared a bus or shared a train to get to the ground. There's so many elements of the rules that Celtic have had to put in place that don't seem to naturally make sense. So again, we're just asking for a bit of transparency about why that is. But the key issue is why the numbers are what they are when they're different at different stadiums across the country.
I was watching that game, Natasha, at the weekend there against Preston. Again, the sun was shining. It was a Saturday night. Yes, I was sitting here in the studio watching and analysing the game. But there was a sense that even though there was only a couple of thousand in the stadium, you could sense that there was a completely different vibe around the place, right? And, when you then look at almost 5 times that amount at Celtic Park tonight, how much of an impact can that be positively for the Celtic team? I mean, we're in a fractured state as a fan base and as a football club at the moment. How important is it? I mean, let's focus on that just for a few moments, Natasha.
I think it is important, and I do think for all the difficulties that we've referred to last season, the disharmony between the board and the fans, the disconnect, the lack of engagement, we've covered all that in detail. But I think it's time to put that behind us, and I think fans, for the majority, are willing to do that and come together to support the new manager and to support the squad that he's amalgamating. I think the fans are prepared to do that, and the more we can get in the stadium to do that, the better, the more we can make our voices heard. Although I believe there's to be no shouting, no singing, no standing. I'm not sure about smiling or clapping, but so I'm not sure how vocal we can be. But just the presence of fans in the stadium, to have that back, I think really is going to be a boost for the team. It's something they touched on last season is massively missing. And I think what fans, the Celtic fans, can bring to the team and bring to the stadium is that extra push. And you need that more than ever on Champions League nights and Champions League qualifiers, and you especially need it when maybe the fitness levels aren't that good. If the legs are starting to get heavy in those last 20, 15, 10 minutes, the noise of the crowd or the crowd being there might be able to give you that extra push to push through that.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. People like Barkas and Ajeti had never played in front of a Celtic crowd until the friendly match against Preston. And I do think it's going to make a massive difference. During the lockdown, throughout that whole process, a Celtic State of Mind covered every game. Every game during that process, there was one occasion where we were unhappy at having to pay more money for the match at Pittodrie, so we covered the women's game that night with a nod to the Aberdeen game as it progressed. And we'll be covering every game this season as well. I'm not quite sure what it will look like, Natasha, what kind of access we're going to get inside or outside the stadium, whether I'm going to have to sit here and actually do the whole studio thing and then dial people in from the stadium. I don't know what it looks like at the moment, but we will cover every single game. ACSOM has massive plans moving into the next few months. Natasha knows about one of the big shows that's coming. We can't give too much away. We've just secured another sponsorship deal, not with an alcohol or betting company, I've got to say also. And we are running merchandise so that we can keep the content coming free charge on a daily basis. And that's a nice wee plug for this jersey over my shoulder. I've got to say, it doesn't look as good when it's not on the back of Russell Boyce, but this is the ACSOM Hoops. There is another jersey coming in the next week or two, which I think is going to be even more popular. So if you're interested, you can check axom.net after today, and all the merch will be available on there, should you wish to support the channel. So we're not asking you for money for the content, but we will have other things available to purchase, including the hoops. Lawrence, I think your order is already in for the green and white hoops top, the ACSOM top. Let's start talking about the football. Callum McGregor, maybe unsurprisingly, has been named the new club captain. It was inevitable. wasn't it, that Callum would be the gaffer? He'd be the man with the captain's armband.
Yeah, I think so. There wasn't any other choice. You had Kieran Tierney in the press during the week. The people that ran the dressing room were Brownie and Calmac. So I think it was just a natural step for Callum to come in and captain. Puts to bed the rumours that he might be leaving then. He's not going to accept that and move on.
He was guaranteed to be leaving according to one pundit in Scotland, wasn't he?
Yeah, so listen, thankfully he's staying, because when you watch the friendlies, he's probably one of the older players that take on Ange's instructions of take a touch, move it, take a touch, move it. He seemed to adapt more to the instructions he was given. And for example, Oliver Cham did, who's not even in the squad these days.
No, and we will talk about Ollie and Cham, because there was a wee glimmer of hope a few weeks ago. I say hope, I'm not sure if that's the right word or terminology when we're talking about Cham, but then he's disappeared off the face of the earth again, Lawrence. I mean, when we're talking about McGregor, Natasha, I think last season you could actually see it in him, in his body language, sometimes in the comments he made after the game. He cut a frustrated figure last season. However, during the Euros, as much as I would love to see him getting a break, by the way, during the Euros and then during the pre-season games, it does seem as though he's got a new lease of life, doesn't it?
I think so, and I think it's absolutely brilliant for Callum to be named captain. It was the only choice, really. He is the most qualified in the squad for the role, and he's certainly been primed for it over the last season, perhaps even longer. I know it's been discussed whether he has the attributes of a captain, and a lot of people think that he doesn't have that presence on the pitch and he doesn't have the characteristics of the captains that came before him. But we don't know that, we have to listen to the people in the dressing room. Like you've touched on, we had Tierney coming out in the week saying he was, a natural leader, a natural captain. When David Turnbull was asked at the press conference we attended, he was asked, in the absence of Scott Brown, who is taking on that leadership role in training, who is pushing the team forward, who is making sure that the standards are maintained at the level that Scott Brown used to maintain them to. And Turnbull was very quick to answer that was Callum McGregor, and he did it while Scott Brown was there, and he's just continued to do it. So he was the natural fit for captain. He is the only choice, and it's good to see that clearly he appears to be committing his future to Celtic. If there was ever a time for him to go and explore other options and to maybe test himself in England, if there was ever going to be a time for that, it's now. He has instead chosen the route of committing his future to Celtic, becoming Celtic captain, which for me is and for him appears to be an incredible honour, and I think the right choice for him. And it's a great story, isn't it, to see someone come through the youth system, to come up through the ranks like he did, and to then become Celtic captain. It's great, and I'm really pleased for him. And in terms of his performances, like you've touched on, I think they're only going to get better under Postecoglou. I think he was frustrated last season, but the whole squad were. It would be hard not to be frustrated when you look at what's going on around you and playing the way the team were and trying to drive that forward is, a bit of a thankless task at times, I can imagine. But I think, this feels like a new era. It feels like a fresh start. And I think Callum can thrive under that and can really drive not only himself forward and his own performances forward. I think he can do that for the team and everyone around him as well.
I liked some of the words being used around the press conference yesterday. Ange called him a natural leader. And the fact, like you said, Natasha, that he knows the traditions and values of the football club. Now, it could have been all so different, Lawrence, when you look at the fact that he's one of these guys who's been here since he was a kid. By the age of 21, he hadn't broken into the Celtic first team. He was loaned out to Notts County and played an absolute blinder. He was winning Player of the Year awards with Notts County. I think he was a top goal scorer over an 18-month period. And during that period, Celtic actually got an offer for him from, it was actually from Cardiff City. And when you look at that situation that you're in with regards to Callum McGregor, it was hundreds of thousands of pounds they were offering. It was Carlisle, not Cardiff. Hundreds of thousands of pounds, not millions of pounds. But he comes back to the club. He eventually breaks in with under Ronnie Dyler. I think, when I look at it, he was never going to break in under Neil Lennon, and he didn't play his best football last season under Neil Lennon. So what Natasha's saying there, under Ange Postecoglou, new lease of life, we're hopefully going to see Callum McGregor, Lawrence, back to the Callum McGregor of old.
managers he's done well, Delia and Rodgers, certainly seem to give a lot of information to their players. You know, and Callum came out after a couple of games last year saying, I didn't know what I might be doing there. It wasn't clear. So he certainly seems to be a player that thrives under that. You've touched in the Euros. Steve Clark, another manager that gives a lot of information to his players. As any, you know, can't be coincidence that Callum then performs well. So hopefully he's kind of manager that suits him and is going to give him what he needs to perform in the park. Listen, Brown is a legend. He's moved on. It's maybe going to free Callum up a bit, you know, to be more attacking, because when he was at Notts County, you know, and under Rodgers he scored a barrel load, and it seemed to drop off last season. So hopefully we see the return of the Mac to a goal scoring form.
Return of the Mac, did you say? He likes the big occasion, Natasha. He's scored in cup finals. He's performed against Rangers, and he likes a goal in Europe. I was speaking to George McCluskey. George McCluskey was actually his coach when he was a kid, and he used to say that McGregor, when it came to the point of him in front of goal, he would try to put as much force as he could, and it ended up going over the bar and wide and all that. And George McCluskey takes credit for that style that he has, where it looks almost as if he places the ball with force. McGregor does that so well. I'd actually fancy him for a goal tonight.
I hope so. I don't mind where the goals come from as long as they're scoring them, but you never put it against Callum Mack in these sorts of situations. Like you said, he steps up to the plate in the big games, and he does have a habit of popping up with these important goals. And how many goals can you think of from Callum McGregor? Usually from, you know, just outside the box, where he pinpoints it into where he wants it to go and hits it with pace. And those are the sorts of goals he scores. If he scores one tonight like that, I'll be delighted. If he scores, you know, a toe poke from 6 yards, I'll be equally delighted.
Well, Lauren says return of the Mac, so that'll be one for the Screamer Celica boys tonight, Lawrence. But we are talking about the game. We're talking about McGregor. He'll be the first name on the team sheet. Let's just have a look at some of his figures. 326 appearances now, Natasha, 53 goals, 15 trophies. He really is well and truly on his way to becoming that Scott Brown type figure at Celtic. I remember when Brown made his 500th appearance, he was one of only 12 Celtic players to make 500 or more competitive appearances. He went on to make over 600. Now, the thing is, at 326, McGregor will be almost on 400 by the end of the season, the way that he racks up the performances. So he's one of these modern players that, you know, you don't see too many of them now. One club men, I know the loan deal earlier on in his career. Testimonial. I mean, it's one of these things. Every couple of years, Lawrence, you would see a player get a testimonial. During the 80s, quite a few players got testimonials. Moving into the modern era, Jackie McNamara, the next one was Scott Brown. So we've now got two players in the squad, in James Forrest and Callum McGregor, who might be these guys that have played for over 10 years with the same club, which is a bit of a dying breed in the modern game. But we're talking about tonight's game. Yesterday, I spoke about my predicted 11. But as I said, I was listening to the press conference yesterday, and as Postecoglou confirmed that anybody who's on that squad list is available for selection. So he was getting asked about Lee Griffiths, he was getting asked about the fitness of Jamesy Forrest, etc. He says anyone on that squad list is available for selection. So I've had to kind of look at the team that I picked yesterday. So the team I picked yesterday was, in goals, Barkas with Anthony Ralston at right back, Near Beaton with a question mark on him, Stephen Welsh, Greg Taylor, McGregor and Sorrow with a question mark on him, Turnbull, Abada, Christie and Edouard. But we've since learned, obviously, that Abada won't be available for selection. So I'm going to take the audacious move and bring back James Forrest on the right and continue with Ryan Christie down the left. Lawrence, is there anything within that side that you would change?
Yeah, I mean, I think Angel I don't think he'll go with Beaton. I think he might give Hield a chance at centre half. I think he's got a vision, Ange, isn't he? It's about developing a youth for the future. You don't develop him if you don't play him. And I don't think he's a guy that's going to compromise his principles just because it's an important European game. I think he'll kind of start as he means to go on. You know, we had Jared when we had him on the show saying, look, the first year's all about developing, getting the players playing a style and getting the team playing a style. I don't think he's going to compromise that. So I could see, Hield and for Beaton. I've
been impressed with Hield. I know you were one of the earliest supporters of him on this podcast or this show, Lawrence, don't you think, though, that Murray has looked more assured? If he was going to throw a youngster in at the back, I think Murray's looked really assured at the back as well.
But Murray's looked good. I just think Hayel's looked better, but, you know, that's kind of, it's down to subjective opinion, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But definitely, you know, I don't think Murray's done anything wrong. You'd see there's definitely potential for a player there that perhaps, you know, at the end of last season, we're going, well, where are our centre halves? You know, who's it going to be? Yale, Murray, they're two big guys. You're a bit more confident. Getting into the team earlier has got to help their development, hasn't it?
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
We touched on Calmat, didn't come in a wee bit late, but at least he was out on loan.
Mm-hmm.
Where would Welsh be if he'd got the chance earlier? Instead of Beaton playing all these games, and Beaton's on a fairly big wages. Beaton's been a good servant at the club, but he's been a bit of a blocker as well. You know, when you get players on that wages that are happy to sit there, be second or third choice and a utility player, it does stop your youth coming through and getting a chance, a game here, 2 games there, and maybe developing and seeing what we've got.
How are you feeling about Ryan Christie and the fact that I would play him? And actually, I'd play him on the left. I know that he's far more kind of noticeable on the right and in the centre, but he has been deployed out left for Celtic in the past, most notably under Brendan Rodgers. I would play him out there simply because we have no one else. Yeah. I mean, Montgomery has done okay, but I think it's a risk to throw too many youngsters at this.
You're not going to be surprised when I say I'd have Montgomery there. I'd leave Christie out. You know, he's made his feelings clear. He doesn't want to beat Celtic. I think Ange just came out and said he's interested in players that want to be there. I want to play for the club. And unfortunately for Ryan, he doesn't fit that bill, does he? So I'd be surprised to see him appear for an Ange team, if that's what Ange has come out and saying. Montgomery's looked good. You know, his friendlies has looked good, and we really need to see him kind of in a competitive game. He's linked up well with Taylor. He gives us a bit more height as well, Montgomery. So for me, I wouldn't be playing Christian. I don't think Ange will. I think it is Montgomery.
Bold decisions there by Lawrence. Natasha, I'm going to come to you. Obviously, this is just my own predicted 11. Christie, although he is one of the want-away stars, so is Edouard, and I'd play Eddie as well because we need to get through this tie. And I just think Christie, as much as I love the sight of a young player coming through, Natasha, you know, and I'd love to see Held and Murray and Montgomery and Moffat all have careers at Celtic. I just don't think tonight's the night. You know, we need to go with that wee bit more experience. People might say it's a cop-out or I'm playing it too safe, but I would go with Beaton at the back and I would go with Christie on the left.
I think it's a balance, and I expect to see Ange implement some sort of balance as well. Like you guys have touched on, he does seem very keen to bring youth players through and give them experience. Something actually the women's team manager, Fran Alonso, has talked about. He's very big on giving young players experience, and he said that doesn't mean throwing them on for 10 minutes or 20 minutes at the end of the game or playing them in games that are of less importance than other games. It means playing them in the big games when it matters, because they're never going to get the experience to play at that level unless you're putting that trust and confidence in them and playing them at that level. And I think that's likely to be a sort of mindset that Postecoglou subscribes to as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if I did see him throw in 1 or 2 of the young players for the experience side of it, and because he trusts young players, but also coupled with the fact that we're low in numbers and we're low in depth, and it's, in some positions it's going to be a necessity. On the Beaton thing, I slightly come down on the side of the fence that you are, Paul. I think that he is going to go for a bit more experience at the back. It's going to be a big test, bigger than anything that some of the younger players are mentioning has faced. And I think he's just going to go with that sort of old pro and Beaton to try and shore up the back a bit. But that certainly doesn't mean that he won't be tempted to switch a Christie for a Montgomery or something like that. So I think we'll see a mix of players like Beaton and Christie and the youth like Yeldy and Montgomery and Murray. What balance he strikes and who gets the nod, I think is going to be a very fine line. You know, between, like you've touched on, between Yeld and Murray. I think if one of them plays, the one that doesn't is quite likely to feel, you know, a bit like they've just missed out, because they probably have. I think at this stage in the season, you know, places are up for grabs and everybody wants them. But this is an important tie to get through, to try and get through, to try and get a result. We need to put ourselves out there with the best possible chance of getting that result and regrouping after that. And if that means that we have to play players like Christie and Edouard simply to get through the tie, sell them on after it and then regroup, then I think that's the position that Postecoglou is more likely to favour.
Yeah, And, I'm not jealous or anything, but when the team is announced, Natasha, you'll be in the stadium. I'll be sitting here in the studio. Jai Hamilton, 1-2. Play Eddie off the left if you want. I mean, that's not a bad shout, actually, because, you can, play out left. You've seen it a wee bit when he was playing behind Dembele back in the day, back in the good old days when we had Dembele and Edouard as well. And the other thing I would point out, looking at the side, is, I'm saying Jamesy Forrest. He was pushed on that subject. Now, you've been in a press conference with Ange Postecoglou, Natasha, and I've been very impressed. He was pushed on the subject of Forrest. He was pushed on the subject of Griffiths. He will only answer the question that he wants to answer. And if he answers it, sometimes he doesn't give you what you've asked for. How impressed have you been? And do you feel that there's been some needle in some of his responses? Is he getting a little bit exasperated by some of the questions he's been asked already?
Yeah, and do you know what it is? I think he's just very honest, and it's something that I said the minute I came out from that first sort of press conference with him, is that he is a guy, what you see is what you get. He's not going to, sugarcoat anything. He's going to tell you the truth, and he's going to be as transparent as he can possibly be, and we're seeing that come through with every press conference that he's doing. I mean, nobody was surprised when he said that Celtic occasionally take too long to get deals over the line, that we stall and hesitate more than he'd like us to. I mean, that's something that we've unfortunately known to be accustomed to for years. But here he is, coming out and saying it, being honest, expressing his frustrations. And if he's saying that in public, you can only imagine what he's saying behind the scenes about some of the deals that are taking too long to go through. So hopefully, this new approach from Ange and his general unhappiness at the fact that we take too long to get deals over the line, hopefully his approach is going to come in and change that. And we are going to see us acting a little bit quicker in the transfer market. He appreciates it. We all appreciate it, that the world is a very difficult place in terms of visas and isolating and things like that. Of course, it is going to be difficult. But look where we are. Look how long he's been in for. I think we all expected to see a bit more by the way of activity, and I think he expected to see that as well. And he's not going to be the sort of person who sits there and says, yes, I'm happy with the way everything is going. It's all great. The board are backing me. I'm getting players in. If he's got a grievance, he seems to be calling it out. And I don't think we can complain about that. I think that's what we want to see and we want to hear, and we want that sort of transparency from him and the club, because I think that's more relatable. The position he put forward of, slight frustration, things he wants to improve, that's something that the fans can relate to. And yeah, I like his style, and I've been very impressed by him so far.
It's interesting that we've not even kicked a competitive ball, Natasha, and he's already shown a wee bit of frustration. But let's talk about the transfer dealings. I mean, he was saying that the club hesitated a couple of times, Lawrence. They could move a bit quicker. In the back of my mind, maybe the cynical nature of doing a broadcast on Celtic is bringing this out in me. However, I'm wondering if we're stalling until one of the big names is offloaded. Now, we've already spoken about the fact that we're still playing Eddie. We're playing him, obviously, for the betterment of Celtic Football Club, because it's bigger than him. But on the flip side of that, Chris Ayer's not in the squad. He's not in the European squad. You would think that that's edging ever closer, Lawrence, to his departure from Celtic Football Club. Are we in that position where until we dip our toe back in the transfer market, we've heard about Starfelt being almost a done deal. Well, it's not done yet. So are we waiting until Ayer is sold and the money's in the bank?
Hopefully not. I mean, we've sold Frimpong, Hendry, Klamala. We've brought in some money in transfer fees. So I would hope we wouldn't. I mean, Ayer, if he's not included in the squad, surely it is because the deal was done, or else he's completely said, I'm not playing for Celtic again. So it's one of two things, isn't it? And surely we would have learned something. But then again, we've got no head of recruitment. Dom Mackay's just in the door. We know Ange isn't handling the transfers, and he's a bit frustrated by it. Who could possibly be giving Dom a hand? Is Dom just going to kick off it? Or will be phoning Peter for some advice on how the football transfer goes? Going to give me your advice, because it seems pretty similar.
It does.
To the previous, 19 seasons or something, getting players in late, not in time, and Ange pointed it out. We knew there was going to be a lag because of COVID, so that means we need to move quicker. Yeah, it's not rocket science stuff. We know what the quarantine period is, so we know it's not as simple as deal's done, get it on a plane.
Absolutely.
So you just do it sooner, don't you? Yeah, you need to move faster. because you know what the time delay is. For whatever reason, Celtic haven't done that. I think all Celtic fans have appreciated the honesty from the manager, although I'm not too sure Celtic did, because it was hard to find some of the clips on their social media. But listen, we've got a manager that's been honest with us and telling us the way things are, and I think he's already got frustrations that we've had for about 20 years. So, not getting players in time for the Champions League qualifiers is one of the big ones, isn't it?
Well, a few months ago, Natasha, we started talking on a Celtic State of Mind about the back four being Ralston, Taylor, Welsh and Beaton. Now, it was partly in jest, partly tongue-in-cheek, but it's come home to roost, because see tonight, that's probably our strongest defence. Now, then it begs the question, going back to some of the points that Lawrence was making there, it begs the question about, if we're not prepared, then what are we doing when it comes to approaching European football, Natasha? Are we taking it as a football club seriously enough? Now, as a fan, and sometimes you can get a little bit, to the point where your optimism runs away with you. You look at the traditions and the history of the club. I've always considered Celtic as being a club with a unique European heritage. And Kevin Graham always brings me back down to earth and say, listen, at best, we're a Europa League club. As a club, are we now looking upon the Champions League as being a bridge too far? I mean, yes, we've had a transitional period. We're still going through that transition. But surely we could have been better prepared for tonight's game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are we more of a Europa League club? I don't want to say yes to that. I still think that we should and could be competing in the group stages every year. I don't think that is out with the realms of possibility. I'm not denying it's hard, partly to the pathway that's put before us and the various hurdles we've got to get over. Of course it's going to be difficult, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be competing in the group stages at least the majority of the time. But what we failed to do is properly prepare ourselves for the challenge and those hurdles that I've mentioned to get to that level. These games always just seem to come far too quickly for us. And you know what? They come at the same time every year. So why is it such a surprise when they come round that they're here already and we're not ready for them? So it is frustrating, because it always seems to be this gamble that the club play with these fixtures, and it's a gamble with the qualifier. And recently, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, it's starting to pay off less and less and less. It's that old, speculate to accumulate, get the players in early, get that quality in early, make sure that you qualify, and then you recover that money by getting into the group stage. You don't wait to see if you get there before then spending the money you need to compete there. To me, it's done the wrong way round. To me, I'd like to see us spend that money, make sure we get into the group stages and get the money that comes with that. And by doing that regularly every season, if you can say that, for the majority of the time we will be playing in the group stages, you start to attract those players as well that want to be playing there. And then that, if you're starting to do that, if you're starting to prioritise being a group stage Champions League team, then, the league starts to, I'm not going to say it takes care of itself, but you're putting yourself as a team at that level, a team who can compete with those teams in the group stages, attracting the players that are associated with that, then naturally your performances in the league are going to go up as well. I might be being overly optimistic here. People will come and tell me that, we're not that level of squad anymore, but there's no reason that we can't be. There's absolutely no reason that we can't be, and it's frustrating that the club don't seem to match that ambition to make sure that we are.
Well, some of these clubs, Natasha, you come into contact with them in European football, and, then they start hanging around the Champions League beyond Celtic. I've noticed that with quite a few clubs over the years. And I remember when we signed Morten Rasmussen, remember him? They called him Big Duncan. And I've got to admit, my knowledge of the Danish domestic game wasn't brilliant at the time. So when we signed Rasmussen, that was probably the first time that I became aware of this football club. And when you look at the honours that they've had, they've won 3 Super Leagues in Denmark, 1 First Division and 1 Danish Cup. It's quite clear that they haven't got 30, 40, 50 years of trophy-laden success behind them. They don't have the European nows, over a 30-year period. But these teams seem to be able to work it out quicker than Celtic. So they come to the party over the last, let's say decade, but they work it out a lot quicker than we do, Lawrence. So we continually make the same mistakes. A club like Midtjylland, who are probably going into tonight's game, I've not seen the odds, but they're probably going into tonight's game as the favourites to get through this. And you wonder how on earth that can happen when it's a club that's fairly new to this kind of level.
It's pretty basic. You need 2 starters for every position, don't you? And I don't know who's sitting down with pencil and writing how many right backs we've got at the club. Right, we've got a bit of an issue here. So I think a lot of the clubs run as basic as that, and maybe they do what Ange has done. You know, if the players are good enough, because this was his pitch to the squad. If you're good enough and you do what you tell me, you're in. It doesn't matter of your age. So it's going to be interesting tonight's team to see how much of that he follows through on. The way Celtic's doing it, I mean, you touched on, are we hanging back to get big money before we buy players? I mean, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because surely the buying clubs then put up the price. If you just sell Eddie for 20 million and Aya for 15, they know you've got 35 million in the bank. Does that push the price up? I mean, there's rumours that said to a club on a winger, hang off, and if we qualify for the Champions League, we'll pay you an extra $1 million. Yeah. It's something we don't do right,
isn't it? Yeah. See, the thing though, Lawrence, you made a point earlier about, you know, the Frimpong money, for example. Yes, Ilhamid's left and Hendry's left and Bayo, but I don't think under the circumstances that the transfer fees have been ring-fenced at Celtic or at any club, because obviously revenues have been hit elsewhere.
We were not ring-fencing, but it's surely not spent at all. I mean, we're not one of the clubs that I think we've got a good credit rating, so buyers generally wouldn't ask us to pay it all up front. We're going to pay it over 3 years normally, isn't it? So at some point we've got to go, well, what's prudent here to gamble absolutely nothing at all? You know, I know a few years back it was said we didn't need European revenue to run as a football club. And maybe you've touched on it. Maybe that means that we don't have European ambitions because we don't need that revenue. Maybe there's a mindset developed in the club and went, oh, well, that's just a nice wee bonus. If we get there, we get there. If we don't, you know, we've got a business as usual plan, which for me is not really good enough.
No.
You know, it's...
You know, my biggest concern with that, Lawrence, right? And this goes back, I think, to always just being a hair ahead of Rangers, right? So it's really looking at a domestic level, Natasha. But, you know, the problem with that, Rangers aren't thinking like that. Rangers are progressing in Europe. They've had 2 good campaigns over the last 2 years. I don't know, obviously, how this season is going to pan out. But if we're not thinking like that, and Rangers are, and they continually bring in the revenue that competition can offer, then actually it's a terrible business decision if that's the way Celtic are looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just simple business, isn't it? You can't possibly afford to let them run ahead with the finances that are associated with European football. If they think that they can do both at the same time, and we think that European success is a bonus, there's just a discrepancy there and a mismatch. I don't think that Celtic should treat European success as a bonus. I think that it should be an essential for our club of our size and our resources every season to compete well in Europe. What compete well actually translates to, you know, depends for me. Like I said, I think that means getting to the Champions League group stages, a good run in the Europa League. There's absolutely no reason that we shouldn't be able to do that at the same time as having a successful league campaign, a successful domestic campaign. We've done it in the past. It's becoming less and less common that we do it now, and there's no reason for it. We've got the resources. We should have the depth of squad and the ability to compete successfully in both competitions. Why we're not doing that is a concern, because the revenue stream from that European aspect is so much higher than it is from our domestic football. So we need to be looking at that. Of course, the league is our priority. But coming back to what I said, if we really focus on the European side of things and the money that's associated with that, we're then using that to build a squad which is more than capable of winning the league. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's looking at how one can complement the other and how you need both to have a successful business model.
Before I move on to some of the other hot topics, Natasha, what is your plans? What are your plans for this evening going back to the game? Talk us through it.
Gonna head through with my dad, you know, quite sharp, get to Celtic Park in the sunshine. It's been a long time since me and my dad were at a football game together. Like we're saying, it's been what, March against St Mirren. It feels like forever, but I'm sure when we're back it'll feel like 2 minutes. Get into the stadium nice and early, maybe partake of 1 or 2 drinks on the way, and then go out and watch the game in the sunshine. And if we're continuing with the plan is to watch Celtic get an early goal and then go into a comfortable victory. That probably will depend on how many drinks I've had, whether I'm optimistic about that or not. But yeah, why not? Let's hope that that's the case.
We're all happy for you, Natasha. We're not jealous in any way, shape or form.
I feel that. I definitely feel the happiness for me and no jealousy. Yeah, the ballot worked in my favour this time, so I was delighted.
Good on you. Now, Jock McCroif, we don't have European ambitions, that's glaringly obvious. When you look at the way that we fail to prepare for these big games year on year, then it's difficult to actually argue with Jock McCroif. Now, as a fan who's maybe got his head in the clouds, I fail to accept that as a Celtic supporter. I don't think we could ever write off Europe. It's something that, as you said, but we've seen during this lockdown more than ever that you cannot have a business plan, Lawrence, which relies so heavily on season ticket sales, because it was only through, the dedication and the loyalty of the Celtic fan base that we're not staring down the barrel of a financial minefield at this moment in time. Had the Celtic fans not come out in their tens of thousands last season and this season, with no guarantee as to when we're getting back into the ground, and bought their season tickets or renewed their season tickets, then Celtic would have been in financial peril. So surely that's as much a reason as ever to say, well, we can't put all our eggs in that basket. We need to really focus on Champions League success.
Where does your biggest income come from? Celtic's tickets at the moment. As you've said, it's all in one basket, so we need to... Where's the other big pot? Champions League. And it's funny because we prepared... We bought disco lights so as we look good when we got to Europe. So they're prepared to spend money on lights, but...
I just think of Bio. See, every time you mention it, I just think of Bio with the lights, when they shone on him, he was on the spotlight, wasn't he?
But they're not prepared to pay money for the players to get us there, but they'll pay money up front for lights for when we get... It's a crazy decision for a football club. Disco lights, as good as they look, doesn't look as good as a top quality player scoring the Champions League for us.
No.
And that's really appear to have the trouble. Hopefully that changes with Dom and the new head of recruitment, whoever it's going to be, and the new head of the football department, if we're still looking for that. Who knows? It's 2 key positions that have went unfilled for quite some time.
I wanted to speak about it, and I definitely will come back to it, but there's another point we need to speak about, the elephant in the room, before we get to that, Lawrence. But before I speak about the elephant in the room, vital Celtic news. Celtic fans have never written off Europe. The board have. 100% agree with that. Let's talk about Lee Griffiths again, Natasha. Again, we're talking about Lee Griffiths. Bottom line is, the club have put him back in the squad. And, they've put him back on a training ground. Ange Postecoglou has basically says he's available for selection and I'm just treating him as another player. So it's almost as if everything that's happened has been washed over. He's back in the squad. I mean, it's the type of thing that doesn't sit right with me when it comes to Lee Griffiths. And I've been one of his biggest supporters for everything that he's done and everything he's done wrong, and various parts of that weren't his fault. And sometimes that's difficult to see through when it comes to Lee Griffiths. Last week, I just thought, the time's up. It's time to go. It's time to go, Lee. He's in the squad. He's available for selection. How do you feel about that, Natasha, first of all?
Frustrating. I think if we were to have a discussion about the complexities of what's going on with Lee Griffiths and what's right and what's wrong, and whether he should be in the squad or if he should be in the squad, or whether we should have used this opportunity to get rid of him or shouldn't, we could be here for hours. We could be here for hours. It's not black and white. There's various shades of grey throughout this whole thing. And it's very difficult to call us one way or the other. And I know I sound like I'm sitting on the fence there, but it is one of these things that is complex. For me, I might have taken the opportunity for him to move on. It's frustrating how often we are talking about Lee Griffiths and how little of it is about football. And for me, when it gets to that stage, it's the player isn't doing anything helpful for the club and it's bringing the name into disrepute, and it's perhaps time to move him on for his own sake and for the club's sake as well. I think now is the time to do that. He has been brought back into the squad. Clearly, it's interesting that Postecoglou has distanced himself somewhat from that decision. He says that it wasn't his decision, but that he's in the squad and he's available for selection. I think we'll understand more about Postecoglou's position on it when we start to see the squads being picked. If Griffith is not appearing in the squad or on the bench or even on the pitch, then I think we'll see what the intentions are there, and perhaps there is a school of thought that he will be moved on, but will remain in the squad until that happens. The fact that it wasn't Postecoglou's decision is somewhat interesting. He does seem to sort of washed his hands of this one and taken a step back and saying it was decided for me. My thought there is, if Postecoglou isn't making this decision or is appearing to have absolutely no influence in this decision, whose decision was it? Who is making those sorts of decisions, and why isn't Ange involved in them? But I think Griffiths' future will become more apparent as we start to see the squad lists over the next game or 2 or 3 or 4.
Definitely. I'm going to throw this one over to you, Lawrence. On the one hand, Ange Postecoglou is talking about Callum McGregor. He's talking about the traditions and the values of Celtic Football Club. It's not really in keeping with the values of Celtic, is it? Really, keeping Lee Griffiths on as a player.
What did William Ailey say? It was, a man has to be a Celt both on and off the park, or if he's no use to the club. Yeah, I don't know the employment law. Maybe Natasha's better place to speak about that than me, but for me, I just can't believe he's got a future at the club. So maybe they're just going through some things in the background, hopefully, before getting rid of him. Because, for me, he just shouldn't be there.
No.
Like you, I was a supporter of him, but his time's up as far as I'm concerned, and hopefully I don't ever see him play for Celtic again.
It's raised quite a few questions, though. I mean, Natasha talks about the fact that we've got a manager in here. We know that the manager doesn't make every decision at a football club. Of course, we realise that. But this is a player that's going to be available for selection by this manager, so surely he should have a say in it. But there was a bit of ambiguity about it. But going back to something you said, Lawrence, about the structure, the restructure, a director of football, a head of recruitment, quite frankly, Natasha, I've not seen any of this. Now, it's frustrating when we get into a situation where we promise Eddie Howe the world. He gets carte blanche on the people he brings in, and the club were at pains to stress that included his director of football. We then bring Ange Postecoglou in after 106 days, and he doesn't get to make any of these decisions or choices. And it actually leads me to wonder how long-term the appointment is if we're not putting the structure in place to suit the manager.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Mackay's first press conference and he seemed to suggest that what they were doing was looking at the football structures of various successful clubs across the UK and across Europe, and that he wanted to learn from those and, implement our own structure and make sure, whatever he said, that we were the best of the best and that we were leading in this, and that he wanted to take his time, make sure that we emulated the right structure and got the people into those roles once those roles were defined. So it sounded like that was all happening. Since then, nothing has happened. That structure hasn't been put in place. And we've been hearing for weeks, if not months, about the modernisation of football operations and the new roles being created and things like that. Well, why is that not happening? Why is there no update on that? Why has it all went silent? And why have we decided from one minute that it was necessary and that we were going to be world leading in this, to a couple of months down the line, apparently we're not going to do anything. There is going to be no change to the football operations. To be honest, we don't even know who our assistant manager is. It appears that Kennedy and Strachan are definitely staying around in some capacity. It's never been confirmed to us if that's manager or assistant manager, if it's first team coach, if there's anyone else coming in. All these possibilities, which were openly discussed when Ange was first appointed, seem to have went by the wayside, and it seems that all we are doing is replacing Neil Lennon with Ange Postecoglou and Dominic Mackay with Peter Lawwell. So there is absolutely no change to the structure. It's just a change in personnel, which is a bit strange, really.
Does it worry you, Lawrence, that is the case? Because, I mean, you're spot on, Natasha. It's basically from the outside looking in, I've got to say, I mean, there might be a big announcement in 3 days' time which shows that there's been loads of planning and restructuring going on behind the scenes. But from the outside looking in, it just looks as though 2 positions have been filled, they've been replaced. So Peter Lawwell with Dom Mackay, and of course Neil Lennon with Ange Postecoglou. But when you look at that, Lawrence, as a supporter, it just looks like it's the exact same structure, the same recruitment model as well. Other than one signing, I think no one is going to argue that Postecoglou had quite a bit to say in Furuhashi coming to Celtic. But other than that, it seems like the same recruitment policy. The whole model is just continuing as is. Or are we hoping for too much too quickly? The issue I've got is it was all going to get torn up and restructured for Eddie Howe, but it isn't for Ange.
Well, almost the same, although we don't have a head of recruitment. There's a problem the way everybody knows there's numerous problems with the how process was run. But anyone else you were speaking to at that time knows that they weren't first choice. That goes for your head of recruitment, your head of football. So they might have looked elsewhere and went, you know what, I'm not second best, I don't want to come. So it may be starting from the beginning on the whole process. But, you know, it's done a huge amount of damage. Whether they're going to change it or not, maybe they've said to Ange, look, what is it you want? And maybe he's wanting time. Jared's told us he's a guy that likes to have the first season to play with. You know, don't expect anything. Well, that's going to be good enough for Celtic fans at the end of the first season, who knows? But it's certainly a worry that the investment doesn't appear to get made in the football side of things. Maybe Dom's in July and he wants a chance to assess it. He's just in the building. He's going, well, no, I want to run things separately. Because you know what? The last people that ran the Howe recruitment structure, that was all over the place. I don't want them anywhere near this. So maybe he's having to start it from scratch. But we're 3 weeks in. You would think we're an attractive proposition to people out there.
Yeah.
It didn't take Ange long to agree. So who have we identified on the recruitment side? Because, you know, it's kind of important that you do the recruitment when the transfer window's open. We're eating into a lot of that. Is it ahead of football? Is it not? If it's not, surely they would have communicated that to us. You know, it's all right having Ange mic'd up sessions and giving us a wee insight into training and inviting us along to press conference and that, but it's structural in the club, isn't it? This is what we were going to do, and everybody's left wondering, are we still going to change or are we not going to change? Could be quite as simple as saying, look, Ange doesn't want a head of football, he's happy to run X, Y and Z and I'll be running the rest of it, and we're still looking for a head of recruitment.
One thing I noticed was when he was asked, it might have been yourself that asked him the question, Natasha, around the involvement in football. I remember, you know, when you looked at Peter Lowell being appointed at Celtic, it was all non-football matters that he was to take care of. When pushed on Dom Mackay's exact role, Dom conceded that he would be involved in football matters, business matters, and charitable matters, and everything else that the club entails. To be honest with you, I don't think there's an issue with that, because I think that the involvement we had previous began to get stale. It wasn't working. We weren't able to pinpoint a player for £2 or £3 million and make £10 million on him. That stopped working for Celtic, and I just don't think we reacted quickly enough to that. My biggest concern now is the types of players who are being linked to Celtic, or those coming in other than Furuhashi, are very much the exact same type of player I would expect previously. So we bring in a 19-year-old Israeli, who, by the way, I think looks great, looks like a cracking addition to the squad, but he's very much the same type of player I would have expected to sign 2 or 3 years ago. It's the same model, isn't it?
I think that's it. I think that Mackay is going to be heavily involved in a lot of the decisions. I think that the decision on Griffiths is very likely to have been his. And I think he's probably like to come into a bit of criticism for that, because ultimately I think we're all agreed that that is the wrong decision, that he should have been moved on. I don't think there's any disagreement over that. Just to circle back on that point, he should have been moved on. Talking about the sort of players that we're looking to bring in, I think the thing is that Celtic are going to have a database. They're going to have had a scouting department. I know that might be hard to believe, but we will have had a scouting department who have a database of players who we will constantly be recruiting, keeping an eye on, monitoring. That's, you don't just disregard that scouting reports in the system and the database of players that we have. You don't just disregard that when a new manager comes in. He gets to have a look at it. Likely the new CEO gets to have a look at it as well. There's no point just disregarding all the work done by the previous setup. If there is any gems in there that they want to uncover and use, then that's great, and they can supplement it with their own knowledge, like Ange's done of the Japanese league. What I would say is that we do tend to be focusing in on the same players, but is that not just the media? Is there any truth to the rumour that we're back into Fraser Forster? that could just be media speculation, and that every transfer window for the rest of time until they retire, we are going to be linked to Fraser Forster and Patrick Roberts on loan moves. That could absolutely all be media talk. For me, if Postecoglou had wanted to replace his goalkeeper, he would have gone out and got Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan sounded like he wanted to come, or that he certainly would have been interested in a move. I think Postecoglou has taken his time to look at Barkas and decided that Barkas is his number one, and Matt Ryan has then moved on somewhere else. So I think if we wanted to replace the goalkeeper, it wouldn't have been Fraser Forster. So perhaps that's just media speculation. And I think that we are likely to see Ange go back into the market that he knows, and start to, try and attract players from there. And it's something I would welcome. Like we've touched on, we can't keep doing the same thing and trying to, replicate the same practices and the same signings of previous years and expect different results. We need to try something new, and if that's using Ange's new and different networks, if it's using different markets, then that's certainly something I would welcome. So hopefully we'll see more of that. Players like Kyogo, definitely keen to see us signing even the Israeli player that you touched on. I think I'm definitely keen to see us signing more of that type of player, and maybe a wee bit less linked with players like Forster and Patrick Roberts. And saying that, Forster wouldn't have been a bad addition to the team. I'm absolutely not saying that if Forster was to come, I wouldn't take him back in a heartbeat. I think I absolutely would. I think he's a superior keeper to Barkas, and I think that'd be a great move for us. What I am saying, though, is that I don't think that Celtic are looking at him. I think that tends to be more media talk.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing about Barkas is I get the feeling going through the pre-season games, and also the shape of Postecoglou's side, the fact that he does like the goalkeeper to be playing quite high up at the pitch. I actually think he's going to give Barkas a run. I don't think that the goalkeeper is going to be the priority in Ange's mind. The rest of the defence certainly is. Joy Division comes on, I think he agrees with a lot of us. Celtic won't get rid of him. Sorry, will get rid of him, but won't be willing to pay him off money before morals. So there's an interesting take on Lee Griffiths as well. Now, you mentioned John Kennedy. Like you say, there's not been that official tweet or the official media release to say that Kennedy and Strachan and McManus and Stevie Woods are part of the backroom team. We've just to surmise that they are. But we will all remember the big night that when Kennedy played so well as a young man against Barcelona. We also saw against Barcelona David Marshall playing a blinder in goals for Celtic. It can often happen. Who's going to be our hero tonight, Natasha?
Good question. Very good question. I wouldn't put it past Barkas. He's looking in okay form. He's making some saves, so that's a step in the right direction. I wonder if he's going to thrive under a new manager. I expect a lot of shots on targets given the way that our defence is shaping up, as we discussed earlier in the show. I think Barkas is going to be called into action a lot. And you know what? Why not put some faith in him to pull us out of a hole on certain occasions? I absolutely think that he could have a good performance tonight. And another one that I'm looking forward to seeing is Turnbull. Again, we all spoke of him very highly last season. It's clear that he was, a bit of a shining light in an otherwise very dark season. And I'm looking forward to seeing him take that form from last season, use his experience of being away with the Scotland squad, and really kickstart into being a key player for us this season. And there's no reason, again, why he can't start that from tonight.
A wee prediction for you as well before we go over to Lawrence, Natasha?
I'm going to have to go for the Celtic win. It'll be tight. I think there'll be both teams to score. Let's say Celtic will edge it, and I'll go 2-1 Celtic. 2-1
Celtic. Of course, no away goals. We used to talk about games like Partizan Belgrade, Lawrence. We don't have to worry about that because the away goals rule has been scrapped. Who are you looking for tonight to make a name for himself or be the hero for Celtic?
I'm going to go with someone we've not put in the starting line. I think with about half an hour to go, we'll see Moffat coming on, and I think he'll light the place up. And I think he's really going to make a name for himself. He's already get people, excited after what we've seen him in pre-season. Ange's philosophy: if you do it going apart, you do what you're told, and you perform well.
Yeah,
he's going to give you a chance. So I can see him coming on, and I think he'll light the place up. And yeah, I'm going to go with 2-1 for Celtic as well. Mm-hmm. But going back to the kind of transfers we're getting in, I think these are the kind of transfers we'll expect under a manager like Postecoglou, who gives youth a chance and develops players.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason it didn't work with the previous manager, because he didn't have the reputation for, certainly nothing like Postecoglou is, of giving young players a chance and developing them.
Mm-hmm.
So we were stockpiling players that, in a large part, you would kind of go, well, did he really get a chance? And I don't think we could say that they did. You know, we don't know what's happened with Shred. You know, he's going to turn 24. He's been 2-3 seasons now. It's just 2 seasons, isn't it? It's his third.
It's gone off the radar, hasn't it?
Aye. So I think we've now got a manager who would suit that recruitment policy better.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, if you listen to Jared, he takes a year to deliver on it.
You keep reminding us of that, Lawrence. It's not doing my mood any good, unfortunately.
Well, listen, if that's his track record and he takes a year and delivers another decade of dominance or so, I think we'd all be happy. It'd be a painful year, but surely nowhere near as painful as last year.
Well, here's hoping, Lawrence. Tonight, I'm going to say Stephen Welsh will star. I think that he doesn't get anywhere near as much credit as he's due. I think he's a solid centre-half for us during difficult times last season, and I'm hoping that he gets a steady partner and somebody behind him that he can trust this season as well. Just a wee reminder, we will be covering the game. Unlike Natasha, we'll be in the studio watching it. Natasha, hope you enjoy that game in person. 7:15, we will be on the airwaves. But before that, 6:30, the boys at Screamer Celica, Kevin and Boise, will be giving you an Urban Hymns special, seeing as we have a prize giveaway. All you need to do is subscribe to us on YouTube, and you will be put into a monthly prize draw, not just this month, but this month's prize is a platinum disc for Urban Hymns' fantastic album by The Verve. So they'll be speaking all about that. Thanks everybody for getting involved on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook, and also thank you to Lawrence Conley and Natasha Meikle for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.